Imagine feeling every joy, every grief, every heartbeat of every person around you. Now imagine billions of voices in your head, all at once. That's why humanity built the wall, not for war, not for pride, but because empathy itself became a weapon. Before we dive in, please take a moment to like and subscribe. This is a story you won't forget. The galaxy had always whispered about the humans, not with the casual disdain reserved for backward worlds, nor the respectful nods offered to old powers, but with the tight, uneasy silence one uses when speaking of something that might hear you. They called us the hermits of Sol, a species that had sealed itself away behind an impossible construct, what they saw as a Dyson sphere wrapping our star in cold, dark silence. For centuries, no ship entered and none emerged. To them, it was paranoia, madness, proof that humans were either too weak to compete with the wider galaxy or too dangerous to be trusted. Some believed the sphere hid an arsenal that could shatter worlds. Others claimed it was a tomb, a monument to our own extinction. But they were all wrong. The truth was both simpler and far stranger. We didn't build the wall to keep them out. We built it to keep ourselves in. The story truly began the day a refugee ship slammed against the boundary of the wall. It wasn't the first desperate vessel to arrive. Pirates, smugglers, even lost pilgrims had brushed against Sol's perimeter before, only to be turned away or silently redirected by automated drones. But this ship was different. It was broken. Its engines burned with the ragged cough of plasma on the verge of collapse. Hull plates hung in jagged shreds, and inside were hundreds of lives, alien families crammed shoulder to shoulder, their voices crying into the void as a pursuing fleet closed the distance. The pursuers were known, the Scolari Dominion. Cold skeletal ships of alloy and bone, driven by a doctrine that mercy was weakness, and weakness was infection. The Scolari had spent decades purging tainted populations, wiping out worlds that refused their rule. And now they were here, their fleet of razors cut toward the crippled refugee barge. They would kill it, dissect it, and erase its memory from the stars. But something unexpected happened. For the first time in living memory, the wall opened. The portal wasn't violent. It wasn't some roaring storm of antimatter or a theatrical display of exotic weapons. No, it was quiet. A seam of light simply parted across the black like the opening of a door. And through it came a single vessel. Not a warship, not an armada, just one human craft, matte black and silent, as if it had grown out of the void itself. It was small by galactic standards, comparable to a patrol corvette, its silhouette unassuming. But its arrival changed everything, because the Scolari fleet stopped, not out of respect, not even out of tactical reassessment, but out of a primitive, involuntary fear. Their instruments screamed with interference. Their crews felt a sudden weight pressing against their minds, as though unseen hands had brushed across their thoughts. The human ship spoke no threats, launched no weapons. It simply extended a field around the refugee barge and pulled it gently behind the wall. And then, before the Scolari could react, the seam sealed shut. Inside, the refugees expected interrogation, confinement. They thought they had been dragged from one nightmare into another. But what they found instead was light. The interior of the wall wasn't a hollow void or a mechanical cage. It was a sky, endless, vibrant, alive. Cities hovered in radiant arcs along artificial suns. Vast gardens sprawled across orbital rings. Rivers of silver plasma ran between habitats, carrying ships along like leaves on a current. It was as if Sol had folded itself into a living painting, a sanctuary disguised as myth. Yet what struck them most wasn't the architecture, it was the feeling. The moment they entered, every refugee dropped to their knees. Their chests heaved, their eyes widened, their voices broke into sobs or laughter or both, because for the first time in their lives, they weren't alone. Humanity's empathy was bleeding through the wall. The Scolari had been right to fear. Our wall wasn't a fortress, it was a dam. For centuries, humanity had carried something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. Empathy not as metaphor, but as force. We didn't just understand each other's emotions. We felt them, physically. The joy of a child's laughter, the despair of a widow's grief, the sharp edge of a soldier's fear. Each was contagious, real and powerful. But when our numbers grew into billions, the weight of it became unbearable. Joy magnified into mania. Grief spiraled into crushing waves of depression. Wars broke out not over ideology, but because one society's pain infected its neighbors until both drowned. So we built the wall, to contain ourselves, to shield the galaxy from our storm. And now, as the refugees staggered into Soul's embrace, the storm touched them for the first time. At first it was overwhelming. An insectoid mother felt the raw love of a human father rocking his child to sleep thousands of kilometers away, and she collapsed, clutching her thorax as alien emotions flooded her. A reptilian elder who had never known affection suddenly wept as he tasted the bittersweet echo of a human's first kiss. A warrior, scarred and broken, dropped his weapon after truly feeling, the healing warmth of forgiveness. But it wasn't just feelings. The emotions bent reality itself. When one human mother, grieving the loss of her child, passed by the refugee bay, her sorrow was so raw, so piercing, that the lights flickered into shadow, and every alien heart clenched with her pain. Yet in the next moment, as another family rejoiced at reunion, blossoms of impossible flowers sprouted along the walls, petals woven from light itself. The refugees began to realize human empathy wasn't just sensation, it was manifestation. And then the Scolari fleet returned. They had not given up their prey. To them the wall was an abomination, a hiding place for weakness. And so they gathered their armada, hundreds of razors poised against Soul's horizon. Their commanders sneered, confident that no sanctuary could stand against firepower. They prepared to burn humanity's myth to ashes, but what they didn't understand was this: we didn't need weapons, we had something stronger. And the moment one grieving human mother lifted her head and whispered no more, the galaxy learned the true power of empathy. The wall shimmered. To the Scolari it looked like a faint distortion at the edge of Soul's reach, nothing more than a veil of bent light. They laughed. A veil, no matter how clever, could not stop their razors. Admiral Kratek, skeletal plates clattering as he leaned forward on his command throne, issued the order. Prepare the cleansing fire. Humanity has hidden long enough. Their sanctuary ends today. Around him, the Dominion fleet adjusted into firing formation. Hundreds of ships, each bristling with spines of plasma cannons and void lances, aligned with cold precision. The order rippled outward. Power conduits hummed, capacitors charged, weapons locked onto the faint glow of the wall. To the Scolari it was simple. A fortress falls when its walls crack, and they believed no wall could hold forever. Inside Sol, humanity moved with calm that unsettled the refugees more than any panic could have. The insectoid mother, who had collapsed under the weight of borrowed love, was standing again, guided by human medics. The reptilian elder still wept softly as he sat in a sunlit atrium overlooking Earth's blue oceans. Around them, human citizens went about their lives, not ignoring the danger but not consumed by it either. The refugees couldn't understand. How could these humans remain steady, knowing that an armada lurked just beyond the veil? Then they began to sense it. Not words, not orders, but a quiet thread of connection weaving them all together. The humans were not calm because they lacked fear. They were calm because they shared it. The weight of dread was spread evenly, diffused, absorbed into millions of shoulders. What would break an individual became bearable when carried by a species. That was the first lesson the refugees learned. Humanity didn't stand alone. Humanity stood together. At the heart of the sanctuary, in a chamber that seemed part cathedral and part command hall, a council gathered. The human envoy stood among them. Commander Elias Rourke, once a soldier, now an emissary. His scars still told of war, but his eyes held something sharper than steel: conviction. Across from him, the refugees' elected speaker trembled. You must understand, Scolari fleets do not retreat. They will burn everything. If you shelter us, you doom yourselves. Rourke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Then let them come. He stepped closer to the alien, close enough that the refugee felt the faint brush of human empathy bleed through, like the warmth of a fire just beyond reach. "We did not build the wall to hide from war," Rourke said. "We built it to keep them safe from us." The room fell silent. Refugees glanced at each other, confusion and fear tangled in their eyes. Safe from us? What did that mean? They were about to find out. The Scolari fired. The first volley of lances struck the wall. Light rippled outward like water disturbed by a stone. To the Scolari it seemed fragile. Its surface shivered, its edges wavered. They pressed harder, firing again and again. But instead of breaking, the wall absorbed. Every impact bled into it, swallowed by layers of invisible force. For a moment it seemed as though the humans had indeed built an impenetrable defense. Then came the mistake. A Scolari commander unleashed a nova charge, a weapon designed not to pierce but to disrupt, to unravel matter at the molecular level. It hit the wall, and for the briefest second, the veil thinned. A crack appeared, and through it, the galaxy glimpsed what lay inside. The Scolari crews screamed, not because of light or weapons, but because of feeling. In that single instant, 1 billion threads of human empathy spilled outward. Soldiers felt the terror of children thousands of kilometers away. Hardened admirals felt the crushing grief of widows who had buried their loves. A single thoughtless technician suddenly lived through the joy of a father teaching his son to walk, and it shattered him more completely than any weapon could. Empathy was not an idea. It was force. It wrapped around them, pulled them in, overwhelmed them. Many dropped their weapons. Some clawed at their own eyes to escape the flood. Entire crews collapsed into sobbing heaps as the truth of humanity pressed against their minds. The Scolari Armada had wanted to break the wall. They had no idea what they had unleashed. Inside Saul, the refugees staggered too. The wall had dampened empathy for centuries, but now a crack let it bleed both ways. An insectoid child screamed as she felt the death of a human miner on Mars. A reptilian warrior convulsed, overwhelmed by the laughter of millions of children at play. Emotions crashed like tidal waves, beautiful and terrible all at once. Elias Rourke gritted his teeth, steadying himself. He had been trained for this. All humans were. "Hold fast," he said, his voice cutting through the storm. "This is who we are. This is what we carry." The refugees clung to him as if his steadiness could anchor them. And then, in the chaos, a single human mother stood in the observation deck above. Her hands trembled as she clutched a faded toy, her son's toy. He had died years ago in an accident mining beneath Europa. She had wept her grief silently for so long, contained by the wall. But now, her sorrow spilled free. The refugees felt it first. Her loss, raw and piercing, struck them like lightning. It wasn't words, it wasn't image. It was living her pain, her son's last breath, her screams in the sterile hospital corridors, the emptiness that followed. The wall shook. Every human in Saul felt her grief as their own, and grief turned to defiance. The Scolari, still pressing their attack, suddenly found themselves staring into a storm they could not name. The mother lifted her head, tears still streaming, and whispered only 2 words: "No more." The whisper echoed through billions of hearts. It became a roar, not a physical sound, but a wave of will, of empathy so concentrated it bent the fabric of reality itself. Out in space, flowers of impossible light bloomed along the Scolari hulls. At first they thought it was weapon discharge, but then metal corroded, circuits burned, and ships began to dissolve, not with fire, not with destruction, but as though reality itself had chosen to erase them. A fleet, undone by grief, turned to hope, turned to fury. The Scolari broke. Admiral Kratek screamed orders, but his crew no longer listened. Some curled on the ground, sobbing. Others tore free of their harnesses, begging for the storm to stop. One by one, ships detonated as their systems failed under the impossible pressure of human empathy. Not a shot had been fired, not a missile launched. The Scolari was simply unmade. And when the last ship vanished in a ripple of impossible light, the wall sealed again. Calm returned. The storm quieted. Humanity's secret remained intact. But the refugees would never forget. They had seen what the galaxy had always feared, and what they had witnessed was not a weapon. It was something more dangerous. It was love, unbound. When the storm ended, silence returned. But this silence was not hollow. It was the fragile, stunned hush that follows a miracle, or a disaster too vast for words. The wall shimmered faintly, whole again. Sul was sealed. Outside it, the wreckage of the Scolari fleet drifted as so much dust, glimmering like shards of broken glass in the starlight. Thousands of warships, erased in an instant, reduced to fragments that would scatter into interstellar winds. Inside the sphere, humanity went on breathing. Not rejoicing, not shouting, just breathing together. The refugees staggered through the aftermath. Some still wept uncontrollably, unable to fully pull free from the storm of feeling. Others stared blankly at walls, whispering fragments of emotions not their own. A few clung to humans like children, desperate for grounding. For hours no one spoke. Then Elias Rourke stepped into the atrium where survivors, alien and human alike, had gathered. His voice was low, but it carried. "You've seen now," he said, "what we hold, what we carry every day." He let his words hang. No one argued. No one could. Later, the refugee leaders met in private with him. They had questions, terrified, urgent questions. The reptilian elder leaned forward, claws trembling against the table. How? How do you live with it? That weight, that storm. No species could bear it. Rourke shook his head. No one bears it alone, that's the point. Every human shares it. Every joy, every loss, every grief. It's divided, spread. We carry each other. It's the only way we've survived ourselves. "And the wall?" asked the insectoid matriarch, her voice a rasp. Rourke's gaze softened. "The wall keeps it contained. If we let it bleed unchecked, it would crush other civilizations. You felt a crack. You nearly drowned in it. Imagine billions more, unleashed." The aliens shuddered. None dared imagine further. Word spread quickly. Refugees spoke in hushed tones of what they had seen, of the wall's true nature. At first it sounded like myth, a human fairy tale, but the tremors in their voices, the haunted way they avoided each other's eyes, carried conviction stronger than proof. The Galactic Council convened in emergency session. Every empire sent envoys. Some demanded answers, others demanded preemptive strikes before humanity's secret power could ever threaten them again. But no fleet dared move on Sul, not after the Scolari, and still humans stayed behind the wall. No warships emerged, no demands were issued. Humanity simply carried on. That unsettled the galaxy more than any show of force could have. A predator boasts, a conqueror threatens. But humanity had revealed something far worse. They had no need to boast. They had no need to threaten. They didn't want war. They didn't even want conquest. They wanted to protect others from themselves. Among the refugees, something shifted. The insectoid mother who had collapsed under the flood of human love now walked the gardens of Sul with her daughter. She carried with her not just her own feelings, but echoes of humanity's as well. She found herself humming lullabies she had never learned, words from a language not her own. The reptilian elder who had once scorned weakness now paused each morning to watch humans laugh in the streets. He felt the warmth of their bonds seep into him, strange and alien, but he did not resist. Even the warrior among them, scarred, hardened, proud, spoke softly now. "If this is what they hide," he said, "then perhaps they are right to hide it. But I envy them. To never be alone, even in grief. Is that not the greatest strength in the galaxy?" It was Elias Rourke who delivered the final message. When the Council demanded an envoy, humanity sent him, scarred soldier, reluctant diplomat. He stood alone on the tribunal dais, watched by 1,000 alien eyes, under a dome painted with the history of the galaxy's wars. They demanded explanation. They demanded justification. Some even demanded surrender of the wall. Rourke gave them none of it. He spoke simply, his voice steady, his scars visible, his words plain. "We are not your enemy, but understand this. We are dangerous, yes, not because of ships, not because of weapons, but because we feel each other, and we feel you. That is our strength, that is our burden, and that is why we stay behind the wall. To protect you, to protect everyone." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Rourke's gaze swept them, unflinching. You've seen a crack in the dam. You've seen what happens when grief escapes. Imagine what joy would do, imagine what hope would do, imagine what love would do, unbound. If you call that a weapon, then you do not understand. It is not war we carry, it is the weight of being human, and it is heavier than any of you can yet bear. He left them with silence, a silence heavy not with threat, but with truth. The galaxy changed after that day. The Skelari were broken, their empire fractured. Other powers stepped lightly, speaking of treaties, not wars. Refugees returned home carrying whispers of miracles, their lives forever altered. But humanity remained behind the wall. Building, grieving, loving, sharing, always sharing. And now, beyond the stars, alien children grew up with new stories, not of monsters, not of hermits in hiding, but of the humans who carried storms inside their hearts and wove them into miracles. On Earth, the mother who had lost her son sat in a quiet field, the toy still in her hands. She felt him in her chest, not his breath, not his body, but his echo, carried by billions. She smiled through her tears, no longer alone in her grief. Somewhere, perhaps far away, an alien child whispered a prayer of thanks, never knowing why tears came to her eyes as she spoke it. The walls shimmered, silent and eternal. Not a prison, not a fortress, a promise. That one day, when the galaxy was ready, the humans would open it, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to share the unbearable, unbreakable gift of empathy. And when that day came, the galaxy would never be the same.